let's talk for a minute about, because I know Predictive Index is a big part of how you consult businesses like us. It's a very core component. Why don't you talk a little bit about Predictive Index why it's so powerful and how that empowers you to do what you do?
Yeah, so Wiseman Strategy is a team of 5 professionals. We're all a little bit seasoned in our growth as workers in this field. So, we have a person who's really good at spent 20 plus years in leading and training and development inside of orgs, and one who's been really instrumental in executive coaching and recruiting for the last 15, and project manager. And one of our newest associates is a young woman out of Texas, early 20s, who's a behavioral science, actually studying the clinical side and now applying it to actually work in business. So Predictive Index at its core, it's been around for a long time, like 1952, 1955 was the first client, but it's a response to stimuli tool. And really what we're trying to understand and trying to measure is, given a certain set of stimuli, how does that person respond? And that's really what we're trying to measure. All things being equal, what does that look like? And so where most companies kind of make a mistake when it comes to recruiting is they don't understand what they need, right? And so one of the things we help clients understand is, what is the job demand, or what is the gap in your org or the gap in yourself that's going to help you make a more complete puzzle. Because unfortunately, a lot of times what we do, if we don't have any kind of data point to rely on, we talk to people and sometimes we just like the conversation, or we like what they say, or we like their experience, and we hire them. And that has nothing to do with how well they're going to do the job or what you need them to do.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, you hire people for what they say they've done, and then you hate them for who they are, right? Or you don't like them for who they are. Yeah. And so it's like this idea of using data to say, okay, first and foremost, what do we need? And that hunter, scenario I gave you, you need someone who's going to process all the work that you've done, and they're going to think totally different than you. They're going to act different than you. They're going to process information different than you. And you have to be, okay, that's what I need in order for us to scale and to grow. You don't need 10 more hunters, right? Necessarily, right? You need to find out, how do we become more efficient with the things that I'm bringing in that's in turn.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, for those that are listening to this, how would you compare? Because I think there's some similarity from a high level, if I was just kind of trying to explain this, but I feel in our experience, this has been way better. But I feel like it's kind of like the DISC, or, something of that I mean, it's way more detailed because you can do the individual, cognitive and behavioral, and then you can also kind of like overlay that with the team, and it'll give you management guidance and all kinds. I mean, amazing tool, right? But like for the listeners, would you say that it's a personality or a profile assessment of sorts, kind of like DISC or something like that?
So I think first of all, there's a lot of good tools out there. In fact, DISC is a tool my father used 30 years ago when he was building a consulting firm with athletic clubs, trying to match doctors to patients and selling memberships inside of a time frame to get people to stay, kind of a thing.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's actually so I've been familiar with some of these behavioral tools for a long time, and DISC is a good tool. There's other tools out there that are great tools. I think what differentiates us from some of these other tools is we really focus on work-related behaviors as it relates to response to stimuli. And what I mean by that is, we do 2 things really, really, really well that I think other companies don't do as well, to be honest with you. The one is job defining. Like we do a great job of understanding what it takes to do a job in this tool. Mm-hmm. So for example, if you're, a processor versus an originator, we know the mechanical differences between those 2 kinds of jobs. But what is the job demanding of you? And can you actually make it objective? And can you write about it? Can you understand it? And once you understand kind of what that behavioral demand looks like, you start comparing and contrasting with people coming in to do that work, you can see gaps and fits really, really clearly.
Right.
And so our tool does that better, I think, than any tool on the market. As far as the idea of understanding people and behavior and work style preferences, I think there's a lot of tools that do that. Our company was invented specifically for business application.
Sure.
Some of these tools haven't been developed for that. Ours was for that reason. How can we be better as a business understanding talent management?
Yeah, I didn't mention that, but I actually do love that. I mean, I guess to me, I don't want to say take it for granted, but I forget that it's a part of it because it's just part of our filtration, right? Like
Sure.
somebody has to be we used to do like an 8 out of 10 for both behavioral and cognitive. And as we started getting more and more candidates, we went, okay, let's do 9 or above.
Yeah.
Right. And, I mean, dude, the matchup of like, because there's a different personality, right? Like you had mentioned, you know, I know you have exposure to me and McBilly, right? It's like he can do steady amounts of the same thing for hours on end. I lose my shit after about 30 minutes of that, right?
Right.
I feel like you and I have kind of, I guess you could say, commiserated on that.
I'm the same way. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting to see how Predictive Index helps you kind of lean into the strengths because, like you said, oftentimes you'll hire somebody based on their experience and you're letting the past dictate the future when really the present is what should be the leading indicator for that. And the problem is most people have no form of measurement. And
Right.
so
It's the
they're
data
guessing.
point. It makes it objective rather than being subjective. I think a good way, a good way to explain this, I think for me that makes sense to me is actually this is a funny story. So I was raised by a guy. I always joke around. My dad, who I'm very close to. I actually worked with him for about 20 years, but he is a mix between Mike Ditka and General Patton. So super mellow.
Yeah.
Like he's super intense. And so I came home from my senior trip at 17 or 18. I was with some buddies and we were hanging out in California, and summer's, high school's over and you're trying to think, okay, I'm just gonna get this job, be ready for college, whatever. So I had that on my agenda to do. I come home on a Sunday. I think it was like Sunday. And my dad walks into my room and he says, "Oh, by the way, I have a job for you tomorrow." And I'm like, "Well, you have an interview? Like, what are you talking about?" He goes, "No, you're starting tomorrow." I'm like, "What the hell are you talking about?" Now, I didn't say that to him because it's General Patton, right? Because I don't want to get killed.
Right.
I'm like, "Okay, sounds good. Yes, sir. Tomorrow I'm starting." And I didn't really know anything other than I was supposed to go to a local car. And you may remember Larry H. Miller. He was the owner of the Jazz. Had several car dealerships across this country.
Right.
I was supposed to report to Larry H. Miller Chevrolet, go talk to this accounting department, and go talk to this woman named Gail Luth, and the job's waiting for me. So I show up 7 o'clock the next morning. Gail Luth, she had to be like 6'2", cowboy hat, rhinestones, turquoise, smoked non-filtered cigarettes in like 3 seconds. Scared the living piss out of me. Yeah, she was super intense. And she directed me to this corner and said, "Okay, you're doing data entry all day. That's your job." And I was like, okay. And back then it wasn't a computer screen. It was just like paper and you entered warranties. And if you screwed up, you had to start all over.
Oh my God.
So me being, I could call myself, you understand this works press. I'm kind of a hyper person. The detail, I'm always the bigger new things, innovation, new ideas, venture out.
Mm-hmm.
You're asking me to sit on a desk all day long and put in data.
Mm-hmm.
All day freaking long. I want to kill myself. Like, an 8-hour day turned into like a 20-hour day. Like I would take a full-hour lunch break for the first time ever because I could not stand going back to work. Like I would rather watch General Hospital in the parts department sitting on a couch than go back and do data entry. That's how much I hated my job. So if you think about that, about this idea of job demand, what was it about that job? Well, it wasn't intellectually demanding. It wasn't like hard to understand. It wasn't a knowledge skill set things. It's like, what was the job demanding of me that I didn't possess? And what the job demanded of me was patience, routine, process, accuracy, and steadiness of time. I possessed none of those things. It was brutal. Like I sucked so bad at that job. It was so bad. I was brutal. And so I always tell people, if you bought a car in the early 80s from Larry H. Miller, I screwed up your warranty and you probably needed it. I sucked so bad at my job.
That's great.
But I guess the funny story about that is 3 months in, I sheepishly go into Gale and I'm like, "Hey, there's a new job for a parts or a runner." And my job was to go all over the valley for the internet, go to the auto auction, pick up titles, go to the bank, go to this deal. All day long, I was running around all day long in a new car every 3 or 4 weeks they'd give me. And I would just be running all day long, set my own schedule, do my own hours, meet people. I went from almost being fired to the employee of the month within 6 months.
Right.
And the only thing that changed was the job demand. Like and I didn't get it at the time. It didn't make sense to me, but the demand of the job was more aligned with who I was. And it was just, the down job became easier.